Welcome back to our global iTech solution GITS Playwright channel on lecture 2. Before you started this lecture, I highly encourage you to complete previous lecture related with this course. Let's get started and jump on the topics. So today we'll be discussing about endpoint execution through the postman, which is on the previous lecture you already saw it, but we'll go through again. Get endpoint development using Playwright API, which is we already did, and we'll be doing another one today, and also Playwright API Assertion. So how do we assert API validation, like response validations? We did it on the last lecture, on the previous lecture, which is a OK status and the 200 status. But today we'll be learn about more and generating HTML report. So let's get started. So on the previous lecture, as you saw it, which is we did it get list of the users. You can use over here also fetch user list, right? This is our endpoint, and if we are using endpoint, this one, let's say this page2, so this is going to be a basic service endpoint. We'll be adding into our configuration file. So if we're using as a base URL service endpoint, right? So this is our service endpoint, always remaining same, and this is our example. Now we'll be rename the test case name a little bit, which is a get list users, get list user, or get user list. So yeah, just put the test case name as a meaningful user list. Okay, so get user list. Let's run it again. npm run test. So test should be running, up and running, and passed. So one test pass, and it is up and running. You see that we are using base URL inside the config.json file, right? And the resource endpoint and the arguments we are using here as hard-coded. Later on, we'll be using data-driven framework. We'll be manipulating this data from the manageable file, which is a JSON file. We'll be using it. Let's add some more assertion. In this, you see over here, we are expect OK, and we are expect status code, which is a 200. If you go back to the postman, which means we validate 200 OK status code, right? Now let's say I want to validate also this response has a per page or page equal to. Inside the response body, if you go back, you will see page equal to, per page equals 6, total 12. I want to validate this too. How do I validate that? So let's go back inside the expect. Let's do another expect. So expect response dot. So we'll be using here a little bit different. Expect await. So this is the asynchronous method, asynchronous function from the JavaScript. Await response.json. So basically our response is a JSON format. As you see, it started with the curly brace, ending with the curly brace, right? So await response.json. Response.json is a function. Then to equal. So we're just making as an assertion as a to equal expect dot object containing we'll be using here as an object. So expect dot object containing will be using whatever the object we have. Let's say in the postman page equal to. So let's use this. Those are the objects inside the JSON file. Let's use this. Page equal to, per page equals 6, total 12, total page 2, right? Let's validate this. It is working or not. npm run test. There you go. So all the tests are pass. How cool it is, right? So in Postman, there is a manual process, but in the Playwright, we just replicate the same process and automating it, right? And generating the HTML report. But in Postman, you generated the HTML report with the Newman, another step. Then also it's hard to deploy that report to the GitHub page in a hosted environment. But as you know, like we already hosted our HTML report, LA report to a GitHub page in the previous Playwright UI automation. So same thing will be hosted our API automation report in a hosted environment, both. Now we see the get endpoints, right? In the get endpoints, basically we saw OK status code, 200 status code, right? And also we saw the like some static object from the response. What else we can do? Well, let's do another automation, another test automation here. Another endpoints. Let's go back and from the regress. So single users. So let's get the endpoint. So we have the service endpoint. We just need the resource endpoint and parameters. Right? So now let's go back our automation. We'll be using a single user. So fetching single user. So fetch a single user. Right? So this is our test case, second test case. And to be 30 or to be 30 and 200 status code. And from the single user, let's go ahead and see what is going to be our response, right? Let's add a request. We'll be using a single user here, and this is our base. This is our base. Let's use here as an enter endpoints. Let's send the request. So we get the single users basically. So we'll be validating 200 OK. That's all I need, right? And also we can validate the data file. Let's see. Let's go ahead in our test cases. And over here, we're not validating here this one. And let's go ahead and see this, it is working or not. So second one, npm run test. So there will be two test case. So two test case, one workers. There you go. So both of them pass. Now let's go ahead in a Postman and get the data file. So this is our data file. This is our data file. This is not going to be working. The reason is you see that those are the object, but this is not the object. This is started with the variable as a data, right? So containing object, but also it's containing. There is a many different validations. We'll be seeing more deep dive validation from the response, but before that, just like they learn about as a happy path, to be 30 and to be 200 and the hard-coded objects from the response. So this is the get. So in the next lecture, we'll be seeing a post. Let's see how this is working as a post response, right? Now, for now, let's remove this one and clean up the code. This is all you need at this moment. All right. Thank you so much for watching this lecture. Stay tuned for upcoming lecture for the rest of the course.